Welcome, everyone, to episode 12. 12. Oh, wow.
Is it really?
12, yeah. Of Radio Free Ortona. And today we are going to continue our after our lengthy hiatus, we're going to continue our conversation on the utility of the political spectrum.
Our raw takedown of it.
Yeah. Our gutting of it.
Well, with that in mind, I just want to take the opportunity to, in your presence, wish you a Merry Christmas and hope both of you barbarians got the requisite amount of coal in your stockings this year or last year.
I got black pellets, I think.
Black pellets, yeah. I was going to get some coal, but instead I got a note about the carbon impact of such a thing. And so he's going to, I think Santa is going to find some other way to symbolize bad people for gifts that has less of an impact on the environment.
That would actually be, I think, worse in my eyes than coal is getting a carbon offset.
Carbon offset.
You're bad. Here's a carbon offset. Son of a bitch.
Yeah, a subject for another podcast.
Yeah, or a deduction in your social credit score.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So I'm going to start this off by saying I think we were completely up the wrong tree. I think our model, basically that we are pursuing, doesn't really work. Now, first of all, I'm going to start this on the Kalashnikov principle. Remember the guy who invented the Kalashnikov?
Mikhail Kalashnikov?
Yes. His principle that which is, or he wanted a device that would be eminently useful and practical and could be utilized by someone with a minimum of formal training. I think a model of the political spectrum should be the same way. It's something that must be very practicable, very easy to digest and assimilate, and can be used by anyone with a minimum of formal training. So I'm going to take the Kalashnikov principle that which is simple is useful, that which is complex is not. So on our 4-quadrant model where we talked about the north-south axes, or say it was bow and stern,
Yes.
as being political matters, and then we talked about port and starboard as being a model of income redistribution. If you were on, I believe, port, you were full redistribution. And if you were on far starboard, you wanted no redistribution. Where does environmental policy fit in that?
Well, I think I was actually going to joke that I think I ended up trying to complicate things, or considered offering to complicate things by adding a third axis, which is the social axis.
And I thought about that. So I did a little bit of looking into what other scholars have tried on this model. And that very thing has happened. Right. Where different models come about. So far as I can tell, the original model of the quadrant of the two axes, one for political, one for economic, came from a psychologist. He was German-born, but he did his professional career in the UK. And he originally set that up as a model of personality. And then that was adapted to the political. And then, of course, then somebody said, well, maybe we should have a social axis. And another psychologist by the name of Milton Rokeach did that, where he actually had 4 axes. So imagine a cross superimposed with an X. And of course, everybody starts adding more and more axes to measure more and different things, to be more specific in it. This is where the Kalashnikov principle comes in. It becomes complex to a point where people say, this is useless to me, and they abandon it. A libertarian by the name of David Nolan had a model which kind of looks like a diamond, where you've got, again, 4 quadrants, but tilted on a point where it narrows. The further you go out on any given axis, it narrows to represent kind of like that the more minority views being the
extreme,
in
or
the
the
extreme.
Okay.
But then he had kind of a rim on the outside where, again, people who are on the extreme have more in common than people who are in the mushy middle ground simply because they're on the extreme. And again, it's pretty frigging complex. There was another guy who went even further called Vojam on that, who added a third dimension to it. Oh my God.
No, aren't we up to a fifth dimension?
Oh, it's stupid. Like it ends up making, diagrams of economic elasticities of supply and demand look simple. You're looking at all these charts and lines and squares, and you start saying, okay, who gets the ball? Like, which one is the tight end, and who's going to be the strong safety? Like, it's completely counterproductive.
I mean, this is part of the dichotomy of being a human being, right? We want things to be simple, and yet they are, life is fraught. Human existence is fraught with paradox, no matter which way you look. And I think, nowadays, that's part of the discourse that's out there is, no one can grasp that paradox. There's hypocrisy all around because people are holding on to these tenets that anyone who feels like opposing them or feels themselves to be opposed to them can easily point out flaws in that thinking
but
and reasons for thinking otherwise.
Simplicity is not the goal. Simplicity is a precondition for the goal, which is usefulness.
Understood. You're absolutely right. It's about the message, not the medium. How do you communicate that? How do people absorb things conceptually in order to be able to carry on?
Right. So if we have, I think only one axis is necessary. It all depends on what that axis measures.
I was actually going to go the other way. I think I was about to go to say, well, I think everything's a combination of the three. Mm-hmm. And then I remembered that, but of course, but then that's a three. That's
like political, economic, and social.
Yeah, it's a three, because these things are all essentially intertwined anyways, right?
Yeah, what is the difference between the political and the social?
I think in some ways, the way we're defining it was authoritarian versus individualistic, right? And then the wealth distribution was controlled wealth distribution, or I'm not even sure I like that.
Voluntary versus coercive wealth redistribution when we were talking about.
Well, interestingly, if I remember correctly, when we started this podcast 5-10 minutes ago, what I remember hearing you guys say was no wealth distribution versus much wealth distribution,
or
total wealth
mandatory wealth distribution.
Well, I don't remember hearing mandatory.
You're right. Yeah, you're right. It was total, complete. 100% of all wealth is redistributed. It goes into a common pot and then is distributed. Right.
So, and then
both work fully mandatory versus fully voluntary. They would both kind of usefully measure the same thing.
Well, you've got total.
Yeah,
and
all wealth is redistributed.
But the question can be, hypothetically, whether that totality of wealth distribution is voluntary or coercive.
Right.
Well,
it would have to be, wouldn't it?
Yeah, because you got to forget, because if there's one person who doesn't want it, then all of a sudden it's coercive.
It has to be. Yeah, exactly.
By logical extension.
By necessity. Yeah.
But that's why I think so. The political was authoritarian versus libertarian. The economic was distribution of wealth, yay or nay.
Yeah.
Or to what extent.
Yeah.
And then the social is, again, and this is why I say it can be kind of confusing, right? Mm-hmm. It's the self-interest alone at one end, which you could put on the political spectrum in the libertarian.
Yep.
But the other end, it's the social
collective interest.
The social collective interest, which would be more on the wealth distribution economic end of things, right? So now we've got two axes and we've bent a third one.
They're all one axis. Right? They're all one axis. The axis is, as a default, As a default, if I said to you, okay, Trent, there's going to be a situation. The situation is coming in the future. We don't know any details. We don't know when it's happening. We don't know what it's about. And we don't know who's involved. In other words, the only information we have is that there will be a question that we must answer. And so I want to get a forecast from you in advance with absolutely no knowledge. So what I have to get from you is your default. What is your default position? So the only axis that matters is who makes decisions, the individual or the group. Where does your default lie? If you know absolutely nothing about the situation, and you say, well, all things being equal, I think decisions by and large should be made by the group. Or you think, well, I think as a general rule of thumb, decisions should be made by individuals.
Okay, so
everything can come into that, be it economic, be it social, be it political.
so where my mind went with that,
Yeah.
as you were describing that, the concept of a single axis.
Yeah.
I would say, therefore, the single axis is social. And the social collective in itself, somewhere along that axis, defines those three things. It defines how and to what extent the collective interest is, how distribution of wealth falls into that, and how libertarian versus authoritarian falls into that. These are all social considerations as the society that
You could make an argument that all questions are social questions.
I think fundamentally
You could.
that's what this
You
comes
could.
down. Because what
Yeah.
do we keep talking about? In a lot of ways, we keep coming back to the fact that Sweden is not Canada, is not the U.S.
Yeah.
Right? You can kind of roughly lump the Scandinavian social democracies together.
Well, yeah, they have more commonalities with each other than they do with pretty much anyone else.
And I'm finding, actually, the more I look at things, the more the Netherlands seems to have a lot in common.
Sure. I would say with that,
with
yeah.
Denmark, at least.
Yeah.
As much, if not more so, than that does with Germany and Belgium, for instance. I've been kind of surprised to see a few things there.
That's not unreasonable given their similar geography and climate and cultural exchange.
I mean, they're all Germanic. I mean, the Belgians are
Belgians are
part
more
Romance.
Latin. Yeah.
They're Latin and Germanic mix. But the
Although
Scandinavians
half
are all,
of Belgium, the northern half of Belgium
Yeah.
is on that.
In fact, interestingly, not to go down the rabbit hole of how I found this out,
Yeah.
but I had to look into what Flemish was.
Right.
I found out Flemish is Dutch.
Yep. Basically.
I didn't know that.
It's
It's just-
mutually intelligible with Dutch. Yeah.
They have a few variations, but it's like 90 to 95%.
Yeah. If someone speaks
identical.
Flemish,
They can speak Dutch.
someone who speaks Dutch can understand them. Same thing with Friesisch, like a dialect of. I don't even know if you could call Friesisch a dialect of German, but it's one of those languages spoken along the North Sea coast, which, if you speak Flemish, you can understand someone who speaks Frisian.
Yeah, I believe that. I actually wouldn't be surprised to find out that if you spoke Flemish, you could, or if you spoke Frisian, you could probably understand Danish. And that's.
I don't know.
I'm not claiming that as a fact.
Yeah, I don't know.
wouldn't be surprised.
I haven't really seen anything on it. I mean, and there's degrees of interchangeability, right? You may understand, say, 40% of what's being said. You may understand pretty much everything without having any kind of aids. You may be able to understand about half if that other person speaks very slowly and uses gestures to back up what they're saying.
Oh yeah, but
Yeah,
I mean, you
so
can do that
there's
in any
degrees.
language. We've had that discussion
To a
before,
certain
right?
extent, yeah.
I've had that experience. It's some of the most powerfully humanistic
Yeah.
experiences of my life is when you can interact with someone and not
Yeah.
having a word of
yeah.
language in common.
Yeah, like say that
And
person
through
speaks,
tone of
say,
voice,
Chinese,
tone
and
of
you
voice,
speak English.
intonation, facial expression, and gestures.
Yeah.
You can successfully
Communicate meaning.
converse or
Yeah.
transact. You know?
Yeah. But at any rate, I would say that the more I think about this, the only thing that's useful is a single axis that measures who makes, in default, in principle, who should make decisions.
Oh, here. Okay, so
I might have to share this one as like the thumbnail for the show because this is just like the opposite.
This
of what
is.
I'm liking the look at this.
No, this is so complex as to be useless and is only valuable to someone who wishes to obfuscate and confuse.
Okay, well, the listeners can't understand why you're saying that at the moment.
Okay,
So,
it looks like a bingo board with every. It's got more squares on it than a bingo card, and it's color shaded to denote like darker shades at the top, darker shades of green, red, orange, purple, blue, and then lighter shades of those colors at the bottom. And it's got every single color of the rainbow. If I took this downtown, I would fit into a pride demonstration because I got everything in the spectrum on this. How many squares are on this?
It's 13 by 5, so that's
so there you go. 13 by 5.
65 different individuals.
65 different positions.
Okay.
Useless.
so
like-
sidebar.
Seraphian Marxism. I don't even know what that is.
Seraphian Marxism.
I have no idea what that is.
Where?
Right here. Seraphian Marxism. Right there.
Seraphian Marx. I've never heard of
no
Seraphian
idea.
Marxism. I've heard of Ricardian socialism. I've heard of
And
that.
then there's like, if you go down a bit, there's libertarian.
Libertarian Marxism. Okay, that tells you all you need to know.
Libertarian communism. Libertarian
That's like
socialism.
saying daylight, nighttime.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
You don't get to impose your
No,
preconceived notions.
I get to
onto
impose common sense. And this is gibberish. Libertarian Marxism? Come on.
Let's find out.
Come on.
Let's
That's like
find
saying
out the
vegetable
definition
meat.
of that.
That's like saying bovine horse riding.
I think the essential problem with this is that it's taking libertarianism just as like a social construct as opposed to a social
It's-
and economic
Who
construct.
thought of this rubbish? Where did you get this from?
Well,
And
and the reason
some
I'm
guy called the agrarian, I think it was. Just looking back here, that's
Good
the Aquarian.
God.
can you go back to it for a second?
Libertarian
there's a reason-
Marxism.
I have skin in the game in this conversation.
Give me a break.
All right.
All right.
Because I see myself, and I've said this before, right? What I have in common with Steve
Mm-hmm.
is quite a bit of libertarianism.
Define that. Or give me examples. Rather than define it, just give me examples.
I think, like a lot of things,
Yeah.
when we have these conversations, I don't come in here with the whole bunch of, I can't name drop philosophers the way you guys do. I'm coming at it from my own perspective
Yep.
at every single
Sure.
time, right? And it's generally in the moment, in the response to whatever you're doing. So I do feel put on the spot a lot of
Yeah.
times. So tell me what you talk about. I say,
Yeah.
and I will freely admit to you, Paddy, at this time, I don't know exactly what
Mm-hmm. All
I'm
right.
talking about. But I will tell you this, and I get this from Monty Python.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay.
Right? I see anarcho-syndicalist, and that's
It's,
E5.
it's got to be in it. Is it E5?
It's E5.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
I went looking for it. I'm
Yeah.
actually surprised it's not farther to the left. Right?
Okay, to you, what does anarcho-syndicalism mean?
I'm not sure.
I've never known what it means. The only reason I know it exists is because of
Monty Python.
Of Monty Python.
It means
We are an
rule
anarcho-syndicalist-
by trade unions.
Is it?
Yes. Anarcho-syndicalism is another way of saying all power to the Soviets. But very specific. It's not a slogan. It's where they actually put it into practice, where society is ruled by trade unions.
Now, again, using the Monty Python model as the only example to go on here, they elect an executive officer for the week every week. All right? So there is a certain amount of democracy involved.
Could be. I mean,
All right? So that
Could be.
I'm not saying
Yeah.
I know what these things are.
it
I'm just
doesn't
saying
mean anarcho-syndicalism is going to be an authoritarian dictatorship.
I like
It just
this-
means that trade unions are the mechanism of government.
I like this because I'm probably, just looking at this, I'm probably not anarcho-syndicalist. I'm probably libertarian socialist or
It means you're confused. It does. I'm sorry. Anyone who's I'm a libertarian socialist. Okay, so you're a daylight night timer.
I refute.
You're a wet dryman.
I refute the fact that you can just declare that
Yes, I can. Absolutely,
this is day
I can.
equals night, and therefore
I
cannot
can.
exist.
Yes, you either shave your legs or you don't.
Hang on, let me check.
Just everyone.
That's
who's,
like
who's
saying you're. Oh, I'm a libertarian socialist.
I
Is like
can
saying
tell you-
I'm sort of pregnant.
I don't shave my legs, but for decades I've had these 2 bald patches on the front.
You know what? I'm
On
getting
front of
those
my
too.
shins.
I used to. Okay, talk about digression. Let's go into leg hair. I used to have my own set of permanent long johns that I used to carry around with me everywhere. I had more hair from the knee down than what you could put in a Navajo rug. And now, starting to thin out. I'm not going bald at just one end, people. It's creeping up. Creeping up from the ankles. I'm not happy with it. The weather isn't getting any warmer. I need that stuff. Mm-hmm. But anyway, that's my leg hair. That's my leg hair talk.
I've got 3 nieces, and 2 of them have stopped shaving their legs for quite a while.
Now, is that just a winter thing, or is that like a social statement?
I think it's a social statement. Well, one is now I think identifying as non-binary, and the other one is just like, well, we're not dating, so who the fuck cares?
Yeah. So like,
I think there's a lot of that occurred over COVID.
if she was if she was going to be more social or romantically active, she would then shave her legs. You think? Or?
Perhaps. I think they're both looking at it a little politically, like why should we have to? Men don't.
Well,
because they're young. I mean, they.
I guess
the
it's a fair question. It's a simple one to answer, but
Yeah.
it's a fair one to ask.
like the middle one is only about a year.
What age groups are we talking about here? What age cohort? Gen Z?
No, they're Zoomers. Yeah, because they're like the oldest is I think the middle one just finished her 4-year degree a year ago.
So mid-20s.
She's 22.
She's and then
22 finishing a 4-year degree?
Well, I finished a degree a year ago. You start when you're 17, 18.
Really?
yeah, she was high school straight to you.
I
Nick,
guess.
so,
Yeah, I guess.
right,
Yeah.
like it was
Because, girls do graduate high school at 17, don't they?
I graduated
Well, I mean,
high school at 17. So
You could. I graduated at 17.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough.
I didn't turn
Fair
18 until.
yeah, some of it is just
Until
like-
you were already clear of high school.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
There's a whole other conversation there if we want to ever get into Richard Reeves stuff.
I would say it's a fair question. Why do they have to shave their legs when men don't? I think it's also an indicator of someone who does not think very deeply. I think this is a very shallow mind that asks that question. It's like asking, why does the sun come up?
No, I'd say
Yeah,
it's
but,
actually
I
a very
mean-
deep mind that's doing it.
No!
What you hope to accomplish by asking the question becomes.
I mean,
another
it's
question unto itself.
the reason why women have traditionally shaved their legs is because it made them more attractive, not because it helped them find a romantic partner. It's pretty simple stuff.
But-
if men thought for 1 minute, especially teenage boys, thought for one hot second that peeled pins would get them more chicks, Gillette would sell out in every location. Like there would be a mad rush on razor blades.
No question. But I mean, and I don't want to risk going down
This rabbit
this
hole.
rabbit hole because this is plenty of conversations that have been
This is
occurring
fraught with
offline.
peril.
But this is also from like a separate podcast that we're I think
That we're
eventually
flirting
hoping
with,
to do.
yeah.
We need to
Yeah.
prepare ourselves for that one. And,
Yeah.
now is not the time.
We also need
But-
to get I think a guest of the other gender as well. So.
Yeah, there's no
I
question.
guess. Get one of your nieces. I'm just gonna offend her. Drive her absolutely nuts. She get up,
But
storm.
I think you just raised the whole point that in the times we're living in, the whole reason for us even wanting to have that discussion in a podcast is because the times have come to the point where those questions are being asked, right? The
I guess.
definition of a woman being attractive to men is now completely up in the air.
Well,
From the
attractiveness
conversation
changes
of
over time.
the conversation of consent and the conversation about why should I bother and who gives a shit what men think and yada yada. Like there's just so much of that going on. I think you just kind of
I don't know.
raised your own
different-
answered your own question as
Look
to
at
why.
look at photographs of men in 1951.
Mm-hmm.
How many beards do you see? None. Yet we walk down the
It
street.
depends on
today.
where the photograph is from.
This is true, but say North America or Edmonton.
Yeah.
Edmonton in 1951, no beards.
If you
Walk
if
down
you're
White Avenue
any
or Jasper Avenue today.
any metropolitan area,
Yeah, a large number of beards.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd say the majority yet, but a very, very healthy.
Again, it's a generational
cross-section.
thing. So in the 70s,
Yes.
hair was in.
Yeah.
It was all about letting it grow,
yeah.
right? So we're
Yeah.
now 50 years later. So it was 25 years from that. What was the mid-90s?
The mid
looking
90s.
like?
The mid 90s was fairly clean shaven.
Yeah, I would say, in my honest take on this, is that the war in Afghanistan brought about beards because water was precious. The military abandoned the concept of shaving in theater, of requiring shaving as part of its dress codes. The Taliban had no access to nerve agents. No one needed to carry a gas mask around with them in Afghanistan. Water was too precious, so guys let their beards grow. So we had all of these images of the masculine, the hyper masculine special operations guys.
I was going to say it's the Spec Ops community in particular.
They were the guys who have all the romance, who have all the nobody, playing Call of Duty says, I just want to be that normal guy who's in the 265th Infantry Brigade who just, goes up and does his 3 years and then gets out and takes his GI Bill money. Nobody wants to be that in Call of Duty. They all want to be the Navy SEAL. They want to be the Green Beret, the Operator, Delta. Hoo-ah! Those guys all had the Oakleys, the ball caps, and the big beards.
Yeah. Yeah, and
that's
they said, and
where it came from.
it even happened in Iraq as well too, right?
Yes,
And the guys
yes.
were like,
Well, when you say Afghanistan,
Yeah,
you can say
yeah,
Iraq
the
in
sandbox,
same
yeah.
sentence.
but the thing was, beards very, very common in the Afghan population.
Yes,
And so
yep.
the story was always, we're doing it to blend in.
Yes,
And
I've
then
heard
the
that
guys
too.
in Iraq were saying, we're doing it to blend in. Except Iraqis were a very clean shaven.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Iraqis grew mustaches.
They grew a lot of mustaches.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
but that's it. But they were
But, yeah.
generally
because
clean-shaven in
I
the face.
remember I was supervised a 70-man guard force
Yeah.
when I worked in Iraq, and I don't think any of our guys had beards.
Yeah.
There was a bunch of mustaches. Nobody had
lots of
beards.
mustaches, which were grown as a symbol of maturity,
Yeah.
but not a beard.
And I had a goatee in Iraq just because I could.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But yeah, it's the special operator beard
Yeah.
is what really, I think, really made the current beard phenomenon take off.
Yeah, it made it certainly hyper masculine.
Yeah.
Right,
Anyway.
and I think there might have been a cultural shift coming in.
Sure. But beyond that, back to the whole idea of the political spectrum.
Yes, and I just want to say I will share the link to this freaking bingo card of
Yes, to the bingo card.
of a political spectrum, so people can know what we're talking about when we're talking about this.
Well, that's kind of a
You know-
sidebar. I was wondering if we want to look at, maybe we need to go to, if not a YouTube for these, just so people can see or watch videos we're putting. At least maybe have a PowerPoint presentation to go with
We
that podcast.
like a Perun. Video,
We're gonna turn this into now. You're gonna make me learn PowerPoint for Pete.
PowerPoint's easy.
I-
You were in the army. It comes with part of your basic training. You have to learn how to lull people into semi-consciousness
No,
with
that's-
PowerPoint.
That's either phase one or
That's a leadership course.
phase one officer training or whatever they call JNCO these days.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to say two things here.
Yeah.
One is I refute your refutation. I match your refutation with a
dislike
refutation of my
my
own.
dismissal.
I
We
see your
cannot-
dismissal, and I reason with my own dismissal.
We cannot dismiss this yet because we hadn't had a chance to look into it yet. I will attempt to, for the next time that we meet, even if it's on a completely different subject, I will going to do some homework and I'll come back at you regarding the Echo 5, Delta 5, possibly Charlie 5.
Echo 5. Austro-Marxist national personal
No.
autonomy.
No, the other way.
Oh, sorry, that was Echo 3.
Anarcho-syndicalism, libertarian socialism, and socialism and syndicalism.
Well, at least anarcho-syndicalism somebody has heard of. And then
If only from a Monty Python sketch.
And well, it was an actual viable. Not, I don't mean viable, but it was taken seriously in the early part of the 20th century. Anarcho being meaning the dismantling of the
Centralized
or the existing forms of the state. So consider 1910, where we are in that Edwardian period. Anarcho, in that context, meant getting rid of the old model of European parliaments and the vestiges of rule by monarchist, what Metternich considered like the natural forms of government. Syndicalism came from the French word meaning trade unions. So the idea was that the working class, being the majority of the population, should have... It was basically an offshoot of majority rule. So it was, okay, what's the difference between this and democracy? Well, instead of using parliaments like the existing parliaments and national assemblies and whatnot that had evolved out of the traditional European absolutist monarchies where, for example, in the French model, you had the Estates Générales, where the nobility still had a hereditary say in governance. Like Britain had the House of Lords, where what qualified you to be in the House of Lords? Well, you were born with a title. It was a rejection of that, saying that, look, there's these old institutions are corrupted by the nature of their very origin. What's a more equitable solution? Rule by trade unions. So what really, what kind of caused it to peter out was a couple of factors. One of which is, okay, how do the various trade unions, which are, a fairly common sense way to organize your society, if you just say, yeah, I mean, why not break that down by what you do for a living, what industry you work in? Like, I guess it's not a bad starting point, but how do the various trade unions come together?
Yeah.
Right? We're in the steelworkers union, he's in the boat builders union, he's in the, a machinist union. How do the various unions get together to hammer out policy and make decisions? And that's where no one was able to find a solution that enough people could really hitch their wagon to. And so it kind of lost momentum. And then, of course, there were the changes in the aftermath of the First World War. The rise of Bolshevism, the rise of the collapse of a lot of these states that anarcho-syndicalism was in opposition to. Like the German Empire disappeared, the Austro-Hungarian Empire disappeared, and there was a replacement of these multi-ethnic states with single nation states like Poland, Czechoslovakia, the Baltic states, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But at least anarcho-syndicalism was a real legitimate, honest-to-God political philosophy, unlike
Alpha 9.
Leninist democratic capitalism.
Alpha 9.
Spontaneous workerism, Luxemburgism, Guevarism.
I got the mouse pointer on it right now.
Watermelon state. Okay.
Watermelon
we gotta
state.
check these out.
What is that? Green on the outside, red on the inside?
That's what one would assume. But it's under like the alpha axis or whatever that is completely, they call it complete oligarchical.
Yeah, oligarchical.
So just out of curiosity, okay, I see Franco, and I always knew that Franco was very capitalist compared to Hitler for sure, possibly Mussolini. So I'm interested to see. I know where I expect Stalinism to be. That should be Alpha 1.
That's nihilistic tyranny.
Well, both.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay,
Stalin is
so this is where we have that full circle.
Yeah.
Oh, don't get me started on the full circle.
Where are Hitler and Mussolini?
He's got Hitler as A7 at the top row. For listeners, the top row is all of your real heavy-duty, hardcore authoritarian dictatorships. And then the bottom row is touchy-feely. Well, everybody's all over the place.
They have it as free/anarchism.
The bottom row is an absolute word salad of meaninglessness. The Austrian and Virginia school of libertarian minarchism. voluntaristic market anarchism, and agorism.
I get it. The bingo card could probably be pulled down.
This
to
is
an actual
ridiculous.
Bingo card.
Is this serious or is this farce?
I don't know.
This has got to be a political spectrum version of The Onion. This can't be real.
Like I said, where to go?
Okay, so that was the other point. I think I've been thinking about this since last time. I was actually thinking about our last conversation, our last podcast. I think it was just yesterday when I was driving. I was like, okay, because I was fuming a bit at finding myself in the position where,
Having to defend coercion?
from what I remember, the left was being pegged as 100% coercive 100% of the time. And that was
you're
not
on
where
the extreme.
Well, I mean, you guys were saying by definition the left is coercive, and
Yes.
and then Steve pointed out somewhere in there quite quickly that basically they were all coercive except for the far starboard, which is the libertarian.
Yeah.
Okay, so
But yeah, there's going to be a certain amount
and
of
I'm glad
coercion
you said
everywhere.
that because what I was kind of steamed about yesterday is I was kind of like, whoa. You can't just peg this on the quote unquote, and now we're going left and right again, right? When, okay, Stalin,
Yep.
authoritarian, no question.
No question.
And he's quote unquote left, right? But then there's been plenty of the right that we can, and we don't just need the Mussolinis and the Francos and the Hitlers.
If you
We can talk
Pinochet, accept that the fascists were on the right, I don't. I think that has got to be one of the most unjust propaganda jobs of the late 20th century.
Well, that's why we came up with the need for two axes, because the right can mean two things.
If your intent is to deceive and misrepresent, yes.
No.
Yes.
Because
if at the end of 1945, with the liberation of Dachau and the discovering of the final solution, and you say that, oh my God, this will forever discredit the left. This will forever taint us. We will never, ever win over the cultural hearts and minds of the people if we are associated with this. How can we pin this on the right?
no.
And so, hey, let's get something that makes absolutely no sense after all of 37 and a half seconds of analysis, and let's turn our single axis into a circle. That way we can somehow pin the Nazis as being on the
okay.
right, even though there's absolutely nothing right-wing about them.
Well, hold up. That's when that's why we came up with two axes, and you actually just had an argument for the third. In my mind, hang on. Hold your horses.
That, by pointing out something as being completely dishonest, is not an argument for it. It's a condemnation of it.
I'm not arguing that something is
No,
dishonest.
I'm saying it's disingenuous.
You have to let me say things in response to
Well,
that.
you said that I just made an argument for a third axis. No.
In my mind, you did.
Oh,
But
okay. All right.
please let
Go
me
on.
elaborate.
Are you kind of arguing this model?
No.
Okay.
All right.
Nope.
Because again, the right.
Although
can-
I see where he's coming from.
the right can interchangeably be economic capitalism, and it could also be authoritarianism. At least that's been my experience of those definitions, and I've been very careful
Elaborate,
along
please.
the way. to
How? How so?
the political right?
Okay.
And I've had to make this distinction along the way,
Yeah.
because I used to put the two together.
Okay.
The political right can mean authoritarian, and the political right can mean economic.
Such as, example,
So the political right in this country
an authoritarian form of the political right would be, an
be-
example of the political right acting authoritarian would be,
Pinochet,
what makes him on the right?
authoritarianism.
What makes authoritarianism on the right?
Okay.
Because now we're getting to the point where you're telling me that a banana bunch is a bunch of bananas. The right is authoritarian because authoritarian is
What
right.
I'm telling you is that's always been my understanding. All right?
And I'm saying that maybe your understanding was a con job. Maybe you were misled from the earliest days.
If I may respectfully point out,
Yeah,
that's an arrogant thing to say.
it is, but I think it's necessary.
I accept the challenge.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'm the only one. Like it won't take me too much looking on the Google to be able to pull out a political philosophical name of repute that will substantiate what I've said.
If
Right.
if we're going on the idea that if your baseline assumption, if your governing principle is that whenever a question arises, on the whole, all else being equal, in the absence of any other qualifying information, individuals should be allowed to make their own decisions.
Okay.
This is antithetical to authoritarianism.
Yes.
So then the idea that, and if we decide to, if we say, okay, the right means individualism, it's a deviation, it's a transition away, in other words, towards the left.
Fair point.
So if we say that on the whole, all things being equal, in the absence of any other qualifying information, individuals, by nature of their humanity, are flawed, are imperfect, are easily misled, and can be in error. We are safer if we make our decisions collectively. If we make our decisions as a whole, all of us together are less likely to be incorrect. Therefore, decisions should be made by the group. This necessitates a mandatory nature of those decisions.
Hang on a sec. Sorry, I got so much going on right now. But
Go
I
ahead.
came to a little bit of an epiphany of myself because you just made a very valid point, right? Having extreme individualism, libertarianism as the far right, by definition, puts it at
Loggerheads.
loggerheads with
yeah,
authoritarianism, which under certain circumstances I see as far right, right? So you've asked me about how I see myself as being a libertarian socialist, let's say.
Okay.
All right. And I think as you were talking, I had a bit of an epiphany of where I come from.
Yeah.
Right. I see these two things as not being incongruous because in both cases, a certain amount of wealth distribution and the respect of individual rights are both about my responsibility, not just
Yep.
to myself, but to
the whole.
to the individuals within the whole.
Okay.
Right? So that's why I don't see them as incongruous, right? A libertarian socialist is, to me, that's always been about respecting you and your rights, you know, and also respecting the other members of my society. And I want to try and define my society as large as possible. Just in terms of, you know, the basic necessities of life, right?
Well, let's put some boots on the ground here, and we'll talk about income redistribution. Would you support a system where we say, okay, income redistribution will be voluntary? Each individual decides how much of their income they will provide for redistribution. You could decide that, you know, maybe you feel a sense of great responsibility, and you say, okay, I'm going to, and like this is aside from other government programs such as maintenance of the roads, parks and rec, like that's separate. This is just purely for distribution. You can say, okay, I'm going to set aside 45% of my income. 20%, 25% will go to government regular taxation. Like we all pay 25% of our income in taxation for other things. Okay, great. What's left? You decide you're going to take 20% of your income that will go strictly and exclusively to wealth redistribution. Where Steve says, I'm going to give 5% of my income to distribution, and I'm going to say, I decide I will give, let's say, you have to give something. Let's make that as our rule. You have to give something. 1% is a minimum. So that I will decide I'm going to give 1%. Would you support such a system?
Maybe.
Under what circumstances?
You just threw so much on the table right then.
Yeah.
I can't unpack it all right.
Give me a couple. Give me first impressions. Because that would be very voluntary. That would be a kind of a libertarian kind of approach to a socialist concept.
I think, okay, on an ideal level,
Yep.
that's a great approach to it.
Okay.
All right.
Very equitable.
I think,
But on a practical level,
exactly. Right. There come times when, and I'm going to utter the words climate debate.
okay.
Okay. And the climate debate, I don't want to get into the pros and cons and what's actually real about it right now. That's not what this one's about, right? But whenever a society is in a situation where it can recognize that drastic action will be required
Yeah. Decisions have to be
on
made.
the part of all
Okay.
for the benefit of all
Yep.
to mitigate disaster for all,
Yep.
right? That's where you can't have that one person. You have to have coercion, right?
Yes.
Now the thing about the climate debate is it's cloudy enough that you got people on all sorts of sides, and it's just a self-perpetuating debate, right? That
You're talking of climate change as, say, just a
Let's say-
situational example.
right,
Yeah.
But let's say there's a meteor
Heading towards the
rocketing
planet.
towards the
Yep.
Earth. There's only one solution.
It's going to be a mass extinction event.
We've got a $100 billion rocket
Yep.
that the world needs to get together,
Yep.
pay for, build the sucker,
Everybody's gotta
fire it
pitch
off
in.
into space.
Yep.
Right? That
Okay.
means everything that everybody does
Yep.
from now for the next 6 months.
Yep. Is
You-
going
you
to
are
that.
you are working for free. You're being
Yep.
taxed 100%.
Yep.
And everything you do is going to be somehow related to the building of that rocket.
Building of that rocket.
Otherwise, it doesn't fucking matter.
Yep. Good
Right?
example.
Did you
Good
say
example.
100 billion?
Well, let's
Whatever.
say
I'm trying to come up with a number. Okay,
a gigatrillion.
20 trillion. I don't know. Right? Yeah, you're right.
Everybody's
okay.
income. Yeah, everybody.
You're right.
I was gonna say,
I just put
100 billion doesn't fund the U.S. government for like 2 months. So
I just pulled a Dr. Evil. I get
Great,
it.
great,
Yeah,
big gigabucks.
$1 million.
Yeah. Yeah. Good gigabucks. So, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a good example. In that kind of case, you can't afford to have anyone opt out.
And so
basically,
and that's when,
yeah.
but that's an obvious extreme example.
Right.
So now,
but let's
let's get back
roll
on the
it back
sliding
into
scale.
the middle
That's right,
where it
yeah.
gets back into practical boots on the ground, just everyday wealth distribution. You wouldn't support that, right? Because, or correct me if I'm wrong,
Well-
you don't like the idea of a voluntary
Okay, so here's the
distribution
best.
because too many people would opt out.
Here's the best example I can give you.
Yeah.
Or the best answer I can give you. I would have to wait and see what the results are.
To
right?
see whether or not they think like you do, and if they do, we're
No,
good.
just
if
to
they
see.
don't,
No,
we
it's
have
it's
to
not
impose.
necessarily do people think the way that I do.
Or are people
Right?
going to make the decisions you want them to make?
Well, in a lot of ways, in a very broad sense, that's the exercise I go through in this social democracy that we live in already.
Yeah.
Right? Basically, I'm taking part in a political system that and my participation is basically twofold. One is I get out and vote, and the other is I speak up and contribute as I see a need to. Right? And the results filter down from there. Right? What do our various levels of government actually end up doing? Right? And I look at it and I go, I'm always going through this.
Yeah.
Now, on a day-to-day basis, like most people, I'm just like, you know what? Life kind of sucks right now, but it could be a lot worse. Right? So roof over my head, food in the fridge, right? I got some income coming in.
Yeah.
I'm working on building my business, yada, yada, yada,
Yeah.
right? But, and here's something I went through the other day, and this is, I can't remember when in the holiday season this was. I can't remember if it was before Christmas, after Christmas, but before New Year's, after New Year's, whatever. I went to buy a pack of smokes.
Yeah.
At the 7-Eleven. It's just up the road. As I was going in, there's someone around the corner in the dark, all bundled up, got their bags of only possessions.
Yeah. A homeless, presumably a homeless person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it wasn't as cold as it was, say, the week before Christmas. So
Still
this must have been
winter.
after Christmas.
Still winter.
Right?
It's cold
You know,
enough. If you're outside, it's cold
And
enough.
I am broke,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I have enough to recognize two things.
Okay.
I've got enough that I'm going to feed my addiction to cigarettes. And I've got enough that I'm not that guy out there.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to defining our society, every once in a while I get a rude awakening, and I need this, and I think we all need this, right? I was very aware that person could be dead. There's a human being
In need of assistance.
5 blocks from where I live,
Yeah.
and this exists in our society,
Okay.
right? Who could die tonight.
Okay.
I can't take care of this person on my own. I bought an overpriced sandwich from the 7-Eleven cooler to give to this person to get them through
Whatever. Yeah.
an hour
Get
or
them
two,
something. Yeah. Okay.
right? Now, a lot of people told me along the way, whenever I do anything like that, you can't solve the world's problems on your own.
Okay.
Right? And that's part of what we're talking about here,
I don't
right?
know.
I can't
don't know.
solve the world's problems on my own.
No, but at least you solved one problem on your own, which is how's that guy going to get through the next hour? I would say that what you did there was a very right-wing action where you you made an individual choice. You took individual responsibility.
It was voluntary.
And that's it. You did it voluntarily. Nobody said to you, Trent, you must part with your money and you're going to buy that guy a sandwich.
Nobody said, and from our perspective, nobody said, Trent, you got to give me $6 so I can give this guy a shitty ham and cheese sandwich.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was actually like $7.99.
Okay.
Yeah, you must give us $14.99.
Unless Karen's listening, in which case I didn't.
So then we can give this guy a shitty ham sandwich.
But here's the point, right? And this is where the whole concept of coercion that I was pushing back against last time. This is where I say that wealth distribution can be voluntary, because that was wealth distribution.
Sure,
but we
it can be.
We never disagreed with that. It could be voluntary. We never disagreed with that part.
I'm pretty sure you did.
No.
Because
Remember our theory with the guy with $8 million? There was the rich guy with $8 million, and you were saying, screw that guy. He doesn't need $8 million. I'm going to take, $6 million or whatever it was from him so I can.
I'm not going to take it. I'm just saying, if someone takes $1 million from him and then gives
whatever.
it to,
you know what I mean?
to feed a bunch of people, I don't have a problem with that.
We've got that guy on the corner, dude, the homeless guy. You voluntarily chose.
Yeah.
So I'm going to buy that guy a ham sandwich.
Yeah.
I'm going to give him something, and you voluntarily did that.
Yeah.
It's a different matter when you say, I want the state to put a gun to the head of Mr. 8 million and force him to do something.
So the reason we talk about a social axis, right? And you yourself said, okay, now we're going to take it from the extreme example of the $1 million rocket to blow up the asteroid.
Or the
and we're gonna
gigabuck.
And we're gonna bring it down. And I think this is the perpetual conversation we keep having.
Boots on the ground.
Right?
Yeah.
It's all about this. Because I'm looking at this going, you know what? That wasn't enough. You're right. It was voluntary.
Yep.
Right? But I don't believe that in Canada we should have a homeless problem.
Then why didn't you invite the guy to come live with you?
I'm part of the problem. All right.
I know that's a very ridiculous question, obviously.
Right? No, but but in its own way, it is valid. All right.
It's only valid
So-
as a theoretical.
This is
basis
why
of
this is
further
why it's
conversation,
this is
yeah.
why it's a social consideration.
Right.
This is why it falls on the axis of how we define ourselves as a culture. Now, you've asked one very good question.
Yeah.
Which is, why didn't I invite him in? Mm-hmm. Right?
Well-
And give him. We've got a guest bedroom in the basement.
It was a completely facetious. I mean,
But no,
instantly, there's a whole number of reasons
it's
why
entirely
you
valid.
wouldn't do that.
right, because
You don't know
Yeah.
this guy. Like,
I don't know this person. I don't know
Yeah.
what to trust.
Yeah.
Right? But I still feel it's a valid question.
Yeah.
If we all did that, right? If people put up their homes, their guest rooms, whatever, to take in the homeless and just gave them a chance, gave everyone,
Yeah.
like create some sort of, I don't know, foster program,
Sure.
whatever, like, so they can clean themselves
Yep.
up, go look for a job, somewhere to keep
Yep.
warm, share a bit of food,
yep,
right? That's what we could do as individuals.
yeah,
As a society, I find it there's a certain immorality to our society that has as much wealth in it. And this is why I have the problem with the guy who's got $8 million a year.
Yep.
All right.
yep.
On some level, there is no reason in Canada that we should have a homeless problem at all.
Well,
Right.
this
Now, I
is-
understand this comes down to human
Yeah,
behavior
yeah,
and
yeah,
stuff like that.
yeah.
But
I know what you're saying. There should be no reason for an economic
if
root
we,
of homelessness.
as a society, valued it enough, we would find a way to redistribute the wealth in such a way that we didn't have a homeless problem.
And-
I realize it's not as simple as
and-
that, but I'm just trying to point out where I'm coming from.
And I think to an extent, we do have a semi-voluntary concept of redistribution where we can take that $8 million guy. And if we go on the principle that many hands make light work, where we say, okay, you taking that guy and bringing him into your guest bedroom, that's a massive imposition upon you. I mean, it's one possible solution, but a severe imposition upon you. But what if we all gave $100 a year?
Well, we do.
We do. And, we take a small amount off of each of our paychecks. There's 30 million of us.
Yeah.
We take $100 a year. We're not going to notice that small amount. I mean, it's very, very, very trivial. It's just not a huge effort for anybody. But that would, come up with like $3 billion a year? Something like
38.
that. A pile of money.
Yeah, 3.8 billion.
A pile of money,
Yeah.
right? So then, we could do a lot of good with that. So the question we have to decide is $100 enough? Should it be more? Should it be less? And then there's further questions. What's the biggest priority? Do we get food first? Do we get shelter first? Do we get clothing first? Blah, 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 blah. All of these things are done. And this is part of the give and take of government. But it comes down to your first principle. Should individuals make these decisions individually, and then we aggregate those individual decisions to decide on a course of action? Or should we have representatives who are experts in the fields, who are better qualified to handle these major decisions, let them decide, and then everyone rolls with that decision?
No, I think we've had this discussion before, and I'm pretty sure you're not talking about government right now.
Well, yes, government is an extension of the group. Government is the real life manifestation of the group.
Right. And yet government can be large and onerous, as we've all
It
discussed.
almost always is.
And so it becomes, how is that administered? How is it managed?
Yes.
I would expect the answer to those would be kind of poorly. And it becomes bureaucratic. And, I mean, I can tell you.
As a conservative, I think this is an unfortunate reality of government. But a collectivist, might... Now, okay, on this point, a good friend of mine, he hates the terms left and right. And he much prefers the term collectivist versus individualist. A collectivist might say, no, government is not by necessity, by definition, inevitably large, bureaucratic, bloated, yada, 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 yada. I, as an individual, say, yes, it is. But again, I appreciate that people of other viewpoints would hotly disagree with that.
I actually agree with you as a collectivist.
The government is, by definition, inevitably too big, bloated, inefficient.
No, I don't think it is by definition. I think ours is. I think it's gotten
right.
to the point.
But it is
I think
not
it's also,
an inevitability of government.
Well, to a certain extent it is, because once... I think it's in the human condition.
Yeah.
Right? That things get... they become big and unwieldy and tough to do. And then it doesn't even... Because you can have three levels of people just like everywhere, right? You're going to have the poison corrupt at the bottom. So they're going to be messing with that system.
Like,
at the top,
the self-seeking rent seekers who seek to maximize their own advantage,
or,
regardless of the cost to others.
People, who are just in it, like they're part of the system,
Yep.
and they're going to be grafting, skimming some
Yep.
of that money for their own, laundering it, whatever, and then we're seeing more and more of that these days. And I don't know if that's because it's happening more, or just because
I think it's just because we're more aware of it,
right?
Yeah,
you're going to have the idealists in there somewhere, and the rest of it's going to be bureaucrats, right? And that's the human condition as well. The example I was going to use it. So once in my life, one time, I applied for welfare, and this was in BC, and I had absolutely nothing, and I was standing in line in the welfare office.
Now this isn't Pogie. This isn't.
This is welfare.
This is social assistance. Yeah,
and it was just to have food to eat, right? And I was so ashamed.
How
to
old
do
were
it.
you?
Mid-20s.
Okay.
Right. And there was another guy in line. He got up the front before me. Now he was a young kid, younger than me, anyways. So early 20s, threadbare sweater with holes in it and stuff like that. And all he wanted bus fare to get to his usual welfare office, because he had to be at that one to accomplish X, whatever it was, right? And he was like, that's all he wanted.
Yeah.
He was like, I know you can't do this here. I have to do it at the other welfare office that my file is at, or my worker's at, or whatever. I just need the bus fare to get there.
Yeah.
And the woman's like, I can't give you the bus fare unless I know your address.
Right.
Because your address has to be in the right place.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it has to be in the zone for this welfare office.
Yeah, fair. That's not unreasonable.
And he said, I don't have a house. I slept in a ditch. And she said, where was the ditch? And he told it, poor guy told her where the ditch was. And she said, that ditch is in someone else's jurisdiction. I cannot give you the bus fare. And I was like, holy fuck. And there I was, for one of the few times in my life, I didn't have the bus fare to give to this guy. Right?
But if you did have it, you would have.
Yeah, I'm just like, how fucking ridiculous is, and this is where we talk about the quote-unquote public service, right?
Right.
The bureaucracy is set up to deny people things. This is not public service.
Yes, it is.
Right? This is...
in many ways, yes.
It is set up to rigidly define who can get it. And if you don't fall within those rigid parameters, they are going to deny you the quote-unquote service. It is not about providing service. It's about providing it to as few people as possible.
It's about rationing.
It's about making sure no one's abusing the system.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. By necessity.
That's how, and that's, that's how they, I think that's how they justify it. But I think it just becomes partly a system control, partly an individual control, petty bureaucracy.
Yeah.
But it's also, they've lost sight of the fact that, okay, it's just like, you don't want an innocent person to go to jail. That's why you've created the rights. So therefore, a guilty person might go free.
Yes.
So that no innocent person gets imprisoned.
Isn't that the motto of the American system? It is better that 100 guilty men walk free than a single innocent man be jailed?
Isn't that the foundation of the common law?
I thought it was an American thing. But one way or the other, we've heard this. Yeah. We've heard this principle.
In the same way, I think that we've perverted the government services to the extent that, listen, I get it. You don't want people committing fraud.
Right.
and getting stuff that they shouldn't. But it shouldn't be at the expense of running the people who need whatever service it is ragged. And you know,
How
and
do you
if they
know?
haven't-
How do you know he was telling the truth? You don't.
The whole system is there for a reason. I'm
Yeah.
telling you, there was a guy who needed a sandwich the other day, and he was like gobsmacked that someone took the time to get a sandwich. He's
sure. I get it,
handed
but-
him a sandwich, and he took it from me. He said, "For me?" I'm like, "Well, part of me is just
Yeah.
laughing inside. Well, I'm handing it to you,
probably
and,
for you.
You know, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like these people need this shit.
Sure.
You know? And if they show up and they've got 9 of the 10 bureaucratic pieces of information, you're going to send them away and tell them to come back and stand in line for another 8 hours a week from now?
Yeah, but this
Right?
there is a finite amount of resources. Even if we go full port on the income redistribution axes, where like Steve's saying, we're hanging off the gunnel on the very end of a rope attached to the mast, and our hand is dipping in the water. There is still a finite, even if we had mandatory 100% redistribution, there is still going to be a finite amount of income
Right.
to redistribute.
But that's why it needs to be managed properly.
Right.
Right.
So there will always be a rationing. Always.
Yeah, I'm just saying
That there should be a better way of rationing.
there's a better way of doing this.
Well, how long have we had the welfare state in British Columbia?
No, I don't know. No idea.
75, 80 years?
Probably not. I think most welfare systems have been in place since,
Second World War?
well, either
Maybe
the
earlier?
Depression or the 60s,
Okay.
right? I mean, universal health care came about in the 60s.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
So let's say the 1960s.
Yeah.
So 65, 70 years with literally the greatest minds. 3 entire generations could throw at this problem. It can't be solved. It's like our healthcare system. Oh, there's got to be a way to make it work better. No, it can't work any better. This is as good as it's going to get.
No, I disagree with
The
you.
greatest minds of the last 70 years across 11 different jurisdictional organizations
I'm gonna
have
stop you right there.
grappled with this problem.
No, they haven't.
And they cannot solve it.
The greatest minds of the last 3 generations have gone into law and are working for corporations and rich people, getting paid a lot of money to defend them.
They're not the greatest minds when it comes to healthcare policy. They're the greatest minds when it comes to legal policy.
When I say I agree with you about the size of government and
Yeah.
the running of government, I think it's inefficient.
Yeah.
But it can be efficient, right? Again, it's
Well,
the human
there you
condition.
go.
And I see it in
And
industry
this
as
is
well.
a philosophical difference, whereas I think that inevitably large organizations, particularly governmental ones, can never be efficient.
Well, we know that we've seen it ourselves.
So long as they're run by human beings, they can't
We've
be
seen it
efficient.
ourselves. What happens at the end of every budget year in the military, right?
March
Every unit
Madness.
out there is like,
Yep.
got to take all our
Yep.
ammunition and use it all up, otherwise we're not going to get any next
Yep.
year, right?
Can
How
I-
fucked is that?
Can I throw some numbers at this?
Yep.
I just did a little rough calculating because you were talking about the $3 billion. If you took
Yeah.
$100 a year from everybody, it's $3 billion, and that's a lot of money.
Good
We could do a
chunk
lot
of change. Yeah, good chunk of change.
So it conveniently comes up. Los Angeles
Yep.
throws a lot of money at homeless people. They have about 41,000 homeless people in LA,
Yeah.
and that includes people living in shelters.
Yeah.
And they're spending about just under $1 billion a year. And so now there's an article I just found on NBC
NBC.
Yeah.
from April 1st of 2022. Los Angeles agrees to spend $3 billion to house homeless residents, and the money would pay for 16,000 beds for 5 years. So I just did the number crunching.
To figure out what that costs
Yeah,
per
so
bed.
that per
What's
bed
the
per
cost
year
bed?
is
That is $37,500 per bed per year.
okay. What was that per night? then?
That makes sense.
37,000.
But I did the math on my
sense.
own and what it costs me
To live.
per year.
Yeah.
Not to own
Yep.
To own and heat this
Yep.
place, to keep the lights on,
Yep.
cost me $28,800 a year for my 3-bedroom house.
Yep.
That's my and that's a little higher actually than what it is, because I said my mortgage payment is about $1,400
Yeah.
a month, and then I added
But
$1,000 just for
Are
bills.
we throwing in food in this? Are we feeding the homeless people in this program? Just the 37,000 US.
Probably we haven't read the story.
I'm going to guess that fits in there. I mean,
That's $100 a night.
that doesn't strike me as outrageous, really, because you're taking someone and, like, we're talking holding their hand, doing like we're institutionalizing these guys.
Yeah.
Essentially. So 37,000 US. So
Yeah.
what is that in Canadian? That's probably close to 52.
I can give you today's exchange rate.
Yeah.
It's 74 or 75. It's basically 3/4.
Yeah, basically.
4/3.
So I'm going to guess that's around 53,000 Canadian a year.
What
That
did you say
would
was
be-
37.12?
That would be
It's about 50.
excessive.
$50,238
Okay.
Canadian at
So,
today's exchange.
yeah. So there's two things going on. 37,000 Canadian wouldn't strike me as outrageous because, again, we're holding that guy's
Well,
hand.
and there's a difference there,
Yeah.
because when I was doing my math,
Yeah.
I mean, this figure
Yes.
is 37,000 and a half
Yes.
US dollars. My number
Right.
is just under 30
Canadian.
grand Canadian.
So when it's 50 grand Canadian, there is a very, very important factor. It's who's holding that homeless guy's hand.
Yeah.
And that's a very, very well-paid and self-interested government employee.
Yes. I would concur.
Well, I agree.
Yes.
Right, but I'm going to where I was going with that conversation is a bit more of an extension of the conversation across the board, and it's not just in government. I see this in business all the time.
Yes, absolutely.
I see it in industry.
In-
that
anyone who has worked for a large, like who has worked in Fort McMurray for
Yeah.
IOL, for Albion, for Syncrude, Suncor, has
I
an
saw
example.
a lot of it from
Yep.
Suncor as well,
How
in
the
particular.
overall, I guess, betterment of the institution is never, ever, ever considered by anyone on the ground. Everyone there, from the corner office to the guy who drives the honey wagon pumping out the blue rockets, everyone is saying, okay, how can I maximize my own self-interest in this situation?
Mm-hmm.
And the bigger the organization, the easier it is to hide your self-interest.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, it's an inevitability.
And I mean,
Well-
it's hard to have the esprit de corps to have proper teamwork, at larger levels. Because
Yeah.
you need all these onerous departments and stuff,
There's-
and
The
commissars.
bigger
to
the organization,
monitor and
the
stuff
more
like that.
anonymous we all become, the easier it is to hide
But
our individual agendas.
Sorry, Steve, but it's
I just want to say that there's using those large
Yep.
private infrastructure projects
Yep.
in Fort McMurray, right? There's a point in all of these where there's maximizing your return
Yep.
as an employee.
Yep.
There's ethical.
Yes.
And then there's unethical, right?
Yes.
Ethical is I work as much overtime as I can.
yes.
Right.
For my own benefit.
For my own benefit.
Yeah.
The unethical, which there's a lot of up there.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is, I will deliberately sabotage this work
Yeah.
so it takes longer and I get overtime.
and I get overtime, right?
Yeah.
Because there's always we opened up this blind because this pipe wasn't flowing properly and we found a toolbox.
Yes. Yes.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah.
I remember working on a project.
Yeah.
And this kind of is a gray area of ethical and unethical. I think it was just a badly negotiated union contract. But I worked on a project at Opti Nexon in Anzac.
Yeah.
And we were pressure testing the world's largest air separation unit there.
Yeah.
Because they put it all together,
Yep.
and so now we're just pressure testing pipe joints and all that
Yep.
stuff, right? So we pressure test the plant. These guys were getting paid 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
They got as a minimum.
Yep.
They got an hour lunch,
Yep.
and
Were they jumped an hour out of the 12?
I don't know.
Okay.
But then they had at least 2 half-hour coffee breaks, which
Sure.
were not. They were definitely paid for those.
Yep.
But of course, you have to walk from the project
to the break room.
to the break room.
So guys would
shacks.
leave early so that they get to the break room
Yeah.
right at the start of the break.
Right.
Well,
And-
that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. Okay. Like I said, this is a gray area between ethical and unethical.
Yeah.
In the end, and then while we were pressure testing, they had to leave. Right. And then it's another thing where, okay, so the crew that is looking for leaks
Yep.
is not the crew that fixes the leaks.
Right.
Right. So we'd pressure test it. Everybody would leave while we
Yep.
pressure tested. And of course, it's a 15-minute walk to the shacks,
Yep.
or to the break room shacks.
Yep.
We pressure test. Okay, the thing's pressured up. Okay, so the crew that's finding leaks takes
Yep.
their 15 minutes to walk back into the plant
Yeah,
and
yeah,
go
yeah,
around
yeah.
in 2 hours or whatever to find leaks. And then, okay, call the pipe fitters because we found
Yeah.
50 leaks.
Yep.
Then they leave and they go back and they twiddle their thumbs until
Yep.
the pipe fitters come in and clear
Yep.
all the leaks we found, depressurize the whole system. Right? If they
Yep.
were getting 4 hours of work out of these guys in a 12-hour shift,
Yep.
they were doing well.
Yep.
Right? And
Yep.
it's just...
It's the nature.
So this is a big bureaucratic
Yep.
inefficiencies that,
Yes.
that happens all bureaucracies. So when we point to the government, like talking about coercion versus voluntary again, like there's a point where like I'm of the belief that the voluntaryism of going through charities is always more efficient than going through government
I would agree.
up to a point. Because charities and nonprofits, when they get too big,
They have
develop
their
all those
own
same
agenda.
things.
Yes.
So,
United Way, please call your office.
or or looking outside, the example that we always use of charity of a nonprofit that just perpetuates itself to
Yes.
is
Yes.
like MAD.
Yes.
Right? Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Drunk driving is way down. We all got the
Yep.
message. You can shut the hell
Yep.
up.
But
MAD exists
Yep.
because there's a bunch of people at the top of it who make 6 figures a year, and they
Yes.
don't want to lose a 6-figure a year job
Yes.
because the mission was accomplished. So now we got to make mission
yeah,
creep.
yes,
Right?
absolutely.
No, and
Absolutely.
I saw what mission creep was this morning. It's like, really? Now they want to make it mandatory for all new vehicles purchased in Canada.
Oh yeah.
To have
You're talking about doing this in Europe. Some trucks in Europe come
to
from
have
the
a
factory of breathalyzers.
impaired
Oh,
breathalyzers,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, again, now we're gonna go for the counter
And that
revolutionaries,
literally
right?
would just save drunk drivers money. Because, like, as it stands now, if you get an impaired driving charge, you have to pay to have that thing installed
Yep.
in your vehicle,
Yep.
and you have to pay a monthly rental fee.
Yep.
If all your
Yeah,
cars
just
just come from
comes
the
with-
factory
yeah.
as standard equipment, now
Yeah.
you're just literally all you're doing is saving impaired drivers money.
You're
and making life a
taking
bigger
you're
pain in the
shifting
ass
the cost from the few drunk drivers to the population as a whole.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, I mean,
You're
and
subsidizing drunk drivers.
And now we're down. Now we're going down the road of, well, if you got nothing to hide, then you should have no problem with it, right?
But the point is that the system
Yeah.
is backwards, right? Like
Yeah.
now you've made it less costly for people
Yeah.
to drive impaired.
Yeah.
Right? So you've completely
Well-
warped the incentive.
Yep.
No, because you are preventing them from driving impaired.
Well, unless
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
do the old 40-year-old version thing like Leslie Mann does with Steve Carell, is here,
Yeah.
blow into this before she takes off.
Yeah,
know.
that's true. There's ways to game the system. Yes.
You know.
I could hang out outside bars and I could sell my breath.
I'm sure
$20 bucks a puff.
I'm sure I could
Yeah.
I could come up with a fan that fits on the end of the tube that just
Yes.
blows in the ambient air
Or
from
like
the
a
car, right?
compressed air bottle of ambient atmosphere.
Yeah, with a little moisture in it to keep
to
private industry will come up with a
They'll-
way to,
yeah.
to cheat
Yeah.
that system, right?
But what you're saying is like Thomas Sowell's famous, or not famous, well, he's famous, but his well-known anecdote of when he graduated from university, a dedicated socialist, and then he got a job with the Department of Labor, and he started doing a research project to determine whether or not minimum wage was actually effective in achieving what it was intended to do in Puerto Rico. And he was immediately shut down by his superiors. Because they had a very, very large office presence based on running the program. And if his research would determine that the program wasn't effective, they might lose some staff. They would have resources reallocated. And to the department managers who had a vested interest, the bigger the department, the more important I am, the bigger my salary, the better my career, yada, 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 yada.
So here's my response to that. and it kind of ties in with what you were saying about these, the guys. I don't even know what their function was. These guys were the
pressure testers.
You were the pressure testers, so these are the leak seekers.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
That sounds like an awesome rock band.
It does.
The leak seekers.
The leak seekers.
All right,
That is
trademark. I copyright that, or was it trademark?
Yeah, trademark. Yeah.
But along the same lines of what you're saying there, to me, we're talking mismanagement there, right? With your guys, someone needs to be managing those crews a bit better, or could be, conceivably, right? That's my response to that.
Sure.
To your thing, it's like you're right. Having a guy like that in an organization is a threat to that department. He's going to get shut down, no question. Doesn't mean the work doesn't need doing. It means someone somewhere needs to take a guy like him, get him to do his work, but not report to those people. Right. He needs to be...
Yeah, I mean, the work should still be done. It's just not in the interest of the bureaucracy to do it. Just like with this article about $37,000 or basically $50,000 Canadian per homeless person. That is double what it needs to be. But, and this is why they're never going to reduce the number of homeless people, because nobody who's spending that redistributed $50,000 per homeless person, that's their job. If I work in the Department of Homelessness and we solve homelessness, I'm out of a job.
Well, you're a fucking bureaucrat, and we can move you to anywhere else in the bureaucracy.
But I
to
like
do your job.
the job I'm in. I'm familiar with it. I don't like change. I like where I am. And what you move me to in some other ministry, you cannot guarantee me that it's going to be upwardly mobile. So, no, I'm not interested.
Well, yeah, of course no one's interested. Nobody likes change anyways.
Yeah, so I'm going to stay where I am, and I have no intention of solving the homeless problem.
Getting to what you were talking about, and again, this feeds into the discussion I opened up in the first place. But when you were talking about ethical versus unethical versus gray areas, right? I think what's completely ethical is it's not malicious at all. It's just inefficiencies. Again, it's just individual. When you get lack of teamwork, poor management, poor leadership, poor self-leadership. I mean, these are all the things that my business is all about, right? It's getting out there and trying to get people to the level where they can operate better together. And I can't remember if I've told this anecdote before, but this is where this is coming from. When I worked at Abraxas, which was the second fastest growing company in the province at the time, and this was mid-2000s, so before the 2007, 2008. Right, and they were a welding fabricator, and don't quote me. I think it was the Long Lake project, right? And one day, their project people, the Long Opti people, came in and gave our people a great big barbecue. It was their engineers and their project managers came in, and it was steak. It wasn't fucking barbecues and hot dogs. It was steak. Did I tell you guys this before?
No.
And I said, so I was the procurement guy, so I'm the one who interacted with the project manager, get all this stuff in here. And he brought me down and said, "Hey, you coming?" And we're sitting there, we're getting our steak and stuff. And I said, "So what's all this about?" And he said, and this blew my mind. I was gobsmacked. He said, "This is to celebrate the fact that Abraxas Construction is the only contractor on that whole project that is on schedule." Right? And so, how many contractors and subcontractors are on a project? There's got to be at least a couple of dozen, right? One of them. Right? Yeah. And I've told the story before, and I cannot remember if I threw my steak in the trash or if I just wanted to throw my steak in the trash.
Why?
You should be happy because you're doing well.
No, like this is what we're celebrating. This was a big fucking deal, right? Yeah. They had like 20 guys on 20 barbecues. This was a big operation. There was a big thing, steaks and everything, right?
Yeah.
And
what's wrong with that?
Yay, we're mediocre. Yay, we did exactly what we said we were going to do. What kind of fucking society do we live in where we are celebrating people who are going to do what they said they were going to do?
In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Right?
There you go.
Maybe you're not meeting your own standards, but you're exceeding everybody else.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I wasn't exceeding our standards. And this is part of the weird thing about being a soldier, right? You know, I talk about being a socialist, but I can
Yeah.
tell you, and that was a case in point at that place. Every time I've been in a union environment, the lack of drive and motivation is disturbing, right? Because what were we taught? You know, in a lot of ways, it's the same thing. You got the brotherhood, you've got the, you know, nobody's supposed to be more special than anyone else. We're all in this together. We're all working together to get stuff done, right? But part of it is, yes, we see ourselves as part of something bigger than ourselves, and the other thing is, we're taught to do our best at everything for the sake of doing our best at everything, and take fucking pride in that, right?
The Protestant work ethic.
And we never get that. You never get that in the union environment. It
generally
drives
not.
me nuts.
Yes, no.
Right? So that's where that was coming from. I'm like, we weren't exceeding our expectations of ourselves. We were meeting our expectations of ourselves. I'm like, in what universe is that something to celebrate?
Well, that comes to the thing. Like I remember, the hardest thing to learn from QL2 was, don't say thank you. I'm just doing my job.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's like the most anti-Canadian thing in the world. But it was like the hardest thing to pick up on basic training was, don't thank me. I'm just doing my job. Don't thank me for doing my job, and don't expect thanks for doing your job. Was the corollary on there that they never said, but that's the point, right? Like
So
Wait a minute. What was QL2 for you? The marching up and down the square part?
yeah. QL2 was basic training.
basic training.
Yeah.
Well, QL3 was basic for me too. Because I did them all in the same
QL3
summer.
was infantry.
Yeah, QL2 is your general universal training.
Oh, I'm
and
just
then
wondering
QL3
where
is trade specific.
when you're saying the thank you bit on QL2, who was saying that to whom?
Our instructors were saying that to us.
Yeah. Don't thank me for.
You know, like when you went to get issued weapons, right? He hands you the rifle. Thank you, Ward.
Oh,
Don't thank me. I'm just doing my job.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay.
But it was all through the school, right? Like you went and asked one of the section commanders, one of your instructors, a question.
Yeah.
He would give you an answer. You'd say thank
Yeah.
you. Don't thank me. I'm just doing my
it's
job.
just contrary to our modes of.
I don't remember that actually from QL2.
Well, you know what?
let me-
My QL, like my QL, I did a combined 2-3.
Yeah.
And all of our instructors, save one, were Patricias, so they were all Red Force. We had one militia instructor, and it was a militia course, but it was we had all Red Force instructors.
Staff. Let me throw a quote at you guys, and I want to get your feedback on it. This is from an author who is generally highly regarded in military circles, Robert Heinlein, because of his seminal work, Starship Troopers. Quote from him: "Political tags, such as royalist, communist, democrat, populist, fascist, liberal, conservative, and so forth, are never basic criteria. The human race divides politically into those who want people to be controlled and those who have no such desire." End quote. Gentlemen, you have the floor.
Actually, could we table this for about the length of a cigarette?
Yeah.
We can. Except I'm going to have to skedaddle at the top of the hour. But yeah, let's take a quick break. And we can resume on that point.
All right.
We're back.
We're back.
We are back.
Okay, so off the top of my head, great statement,
Yeah.
right? The world, history is full of great quotable statements.
Yeah.
It's in its own way, it's very simplistic,
Yes.
right? And like all simplistic statements, it
Has
requires
gaps.
it requires critical thinking, right? It needs to be put in context at all times. It's like I've always said that the worst statement that's been put out into the world these days, in the last 10 years it's greatly affected. It's created the whole woke movement. Is the one where the only thing I don't tolerate is intolerance, right? People have not been able to put that in any sort of context at any given time, apply any critical thinking to it. They just use it to justify, whatever they've decided they don't have to tolerate.
Does it not match into the idea of a spectrum of collectivism on the one hand versus individualism on the other? Who makes
Absolutely
decisions?
It does. Absolutely it does. And that's why I was gratified when you, and it was a bit of an epiphany when you pointed out to me at the end of the the last podcast, that not all coercion is bad.
No.
Because
Sometimes,
that's where the
necessary.
conversation had eventually gotten to, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, what coercion, to what extent, regarding what issues, and who enforces it? How is it enforced? Because another concept that we've come up with is ethics versus legalities,
Right.
and ethics. Some people can be counted on to act ethically some of the time, but not others. It's depends on the person.
Sure.
It depends on the situation.
I think this really comes into focus in the post-COVID shakedown, like where we're taking kind of a reassessment of how did we do during COVID. And I think society really, I cannot think of a time where we more clearly, obviously, self-identified as those who do have no desire to control other people and those who have an extreme desire to control other people. I thought it was I cannot think of any other time in our history where that desire has been so openly manifested.
Also, at a time when society's already so polarized and everyone's used to their own echo chambers, right? So everyone's already in this individualistic, I'm all that matters to me, right? In their own ways, right? And just my mind went a half dozen places when you said that when we went through COVID, right?
Yeah, but
because
it's a good focus point, good example.
And I've pointed out one of my pet peeves with what was happening in Ottawa during the trucker, the convoy protest or whatever.
Yeah.
I can't remember what generic term we gave it. And not just there, but elsewhere. People who didn't want to wear masks were abusing people who were wearing masks, right? And so these people who didn't want to wear masks, who were all, we've had this discussion, I know, like, you can't make me wear a mask because you can't make me, would shit on people who were wearing masks.
Well, yeah, but that went the other way too. There was all kinds of, there was an straight up equal number of episodes
I get that.
of people wearing masks and harassing other people in public for not wearing a mask.
No, I get that.
So,
right, but
that's a wash.
But the dichotomy for me there was that these people who were saying, who were legitimizing their not wearing masks by saying nobody has the right to make me.
That
no
would
one has the right
only
to
be
make.
valid if the participation in that harassment was 100%, and it's not. So I don't think that's a valid point.
I think it is.
That's a pretty
Right.
weak argument. If
I'm agreeing.
If 3 people out of 500 do that,
I'm agreeing with you to
Is
the
that
extent
valid?
that if someone is saying,
yeah.
you don't have the right. It's because it's coming from the
Yeah.
point of view. This is my problem. It's coming from the point of view. I don't want to wear a mask, and you can't make me.
Sure.
Okay. All right. That statement is valid unto itself,
Sure.
right? So, and they're saying you can't force me to do that. Now, for that person who's saying that, you can't force me to wear a mask, to turn around and go to some other completely different person who isn't telling them to wear a mask, and start abusing them because they are wearing a mask. I have a serious problem with that.
Even
right?
if that one person out of 25 or 30 does that, even if it's that one person out of 100 does that, it doesn't validate the point. It doesn't validate the principle, or it doesn't invalidate the principle that you should not be allowed to impose your desires onto other people.
But if a person who's saying that you can't impose your will on me, goes out and does the exact same thing,
That makes them a hypocrite,
Yeah.
but it does not invalidate the first principle. That's the logical fallacy of whataboutism.
not sure where that came from, where you're going with it, but
The proper term is the logical fallacy of propter hoc ad propter hoc. To say that you should not be allowed to impose your will upon someone else is not invalidated by, say, if I say to you, you should not be allowed to impose your morality upon me. And then I go and I impose my morality upon someone else, and I demonstrate a clear hypocrisy.
Yes.
That is a moral failing on my part.
Yes.
It is not an invalidation of the principle earlier expressed.
I agree. Right? No, you're absolutely right. I agree.
The fact that three, loudmouths are on an Ottawa street corner abusing people walking out of a coffee shop for wearing masks in no way invalidates the principle behind the trucker protest of mandating vaccines and masks or imposing lockdowns on people.
Yeah, I mean, that's always going to be a tough conversation, and it's never going to be resolvable. I mean,
certainly not, especially if one comes from the ideological bent that says people need to be controlled. That they should be forced to wear a mask, wear blue socks, wear a symbol on their clothing, wear sunglasses with green frames but not red frames.
You know what?
Whatever it is, whatever imposition we're making, there is always going to be an argument. And let me step back from my earlier facetious point a few seconds ago. There will always be a rational and legitimate argument to be made for why people need to be controlled. And this is a conversation I often get into with some of my more progressive associates, in that they can point out that, for example, again, people are imperfect. Mm-hmm. We can be misled. We can be, like, say, when we're talking about, say, the idea of disinformation in media, mm-hmm. or, say, particularly new media with the internet. Mm-hmm. People can be misled. People can make wrong decisions. Or because they're getting bad information, they can make incorrect decisions. Decisions that are not in their interest, not in the societal interest. Therefore, it behooves us as a society to control what is put into the public forum to ensure for accuracy and completeness.
Interesting. Okay, because now
I'm not saying I subscribe to that argument, but I'm saying the argument can be made.
Right. I think what I'm actually going to go back to at this point is our discussion of the meteor coming towards Earth, right? Mm-hmm. And draw the parallel with COVID.
Sure.
Right. Now, there is no easy way to dissect the last 3 years when it comes to what happened with COVID, right? But I think that's an example of, and it's impossible to prove, right? It's impossible to prove a negative, right? I do have a sense that, maybe we didn't need to do, maybe. Like, I'm not saying yay or nay on either
you're
side
saying you're open to hearing the discussion. Yeah.
It's probably really tough to tell, right? But I do respect, and I don't have a ton of respect for the current government federally. Right? Mm-hmm. But someone had to make a decision. I feel if the federal government, no matter who was in power, had done nothing, the same people who were screaming about what was done would have been screaming about nothing being done. But again, can I prove that? No, because that didn't happen, right? But I don't think anybody was saying do nothing. At least no one credible. I mean, there was a few odd crackpots who were saying, do nothing. COVID doesn't exist. It's a myth. But
there was no constituency behind those voices.
So this is where we run into, the collective.
Yep.
We run into who makes the decisions.
Yep.
What measures need to be taken, right? Wearing a mask sucked.
Yep.
Having to get vaccinated sucked. Having to force people, quote unquote, to get vaccinated and to wear masks sucked.
Yes.
Right?
And that's
were they bad things?
I think it's pretty. If anything, we're guilty of gross understatement.
It's impossible to prove a negative. We can't prove what would have happened if those measures hadn't been taken.
Well, no, but we can look at other jurisdictions that didn't take such strident measures and compare their outcomes. So we can't 100% resolve this question, but we can do a pretty good analysis of it. Like we can come, maybe not a perfect resolution, but we can come to a very practical resolution.
As long as we're doing it with integrity and in good faith.
Absolutely.
From all sides.
Absolutely.
Right? That's why I want to do it. Because one thing right now, I'm finding the news out of Nova Scotia. I think it's Nova Scotia. Out of the emergency rooms there.
Where 2 people have died in emergency rooms.
Yeah, right. And whether it's connected and how connected it is to everything else that's gone on in the medical field in the last 3 years is hard to know, right?
Well,
but
this is something that I've gotten into in the past. And I started about 8 years ago. And I've never seen a deviation from this. I cannot find a single year in history, with the exception of PEI and the territories, simply because I don't think I don't get enough data on the territories.
yeah,
But I cannot find. Also, the territories don't run their own healthcare.
Right.
The federal government runs it. But so far as I can find, every single year in every single province, with the exception of PEI, at least one person dies in an emergency room. Every year, every province.
well, I wouldn't be surprised, and it probably works out per capita. Right?
Well, and that's why PEI is the exception, just
Right.
because
So
it's such
again,
a small thing.
I don't know if it's connected or if it's not. Right?
I
Is
think
this
it's
the pattern or not?
It's
Because
I point to it as an example of our healthcare system and why it's fundamentally flawed right from the get-go.
I think I would agree with you to the extent that we need to be identified. We need to be able to identify flaws in the system.
Yeah.
And improve them. I think the concept of universal healthcare is a decent one, right?
Universal access?
Yeah, universal access.
Yeah, just because when you say universal healthcare, most you could
So
make the argument that the United
universal
States
access.
has universal healthcare.
Yeah, okay, but I wouldn't want to
Like
get
there's
shut
enough
down in the
hospitals
States 'cause I
for
can't
the
afford it.
population, right? And we have the same issue where they say, well, access to healthcare is not the same thing as healthcare.
Yeah, so I'm not with the diehards who ideologically declare that we can't change the system because if you go to a 2-tier system, then the people with money get all the spots.
You mean like what we have now?
We already have a 2-tier
Yeah.
system.
Like, are you talking about our system as being
No.
2-tier?
No,
Because it is. The rich people go to the United States for medical treatment,
right.
where guys like us, we die on waiting lists.
Right.
Right.
I want to just inject one more thing, I guess, that may lead us, because I have a feeling this is going to part 3 again.
Well, yeah, because we haven't discussed coercion yet.
Well,
But-
we are. We're discussing
But
We're
coercion
scratching
now.
the surface.
The
Discussing coercion
thing
now.
is that when you look at, I guess, decentralized individual decision making versus collective decision making,
Or coercive,
Or coercive decision
Or decision making by the individual versus decision making by a representative elite.
But when you're dealing with the population, but you look at so the collective or elite decision making, you actually, for the lack of a better term, the processing power for the collective decision making is actually much lower than it is for the individual.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because if you have 35 million people making individual decisions
Yes.
on an issue, like whether or not to put on a mask, a bunch of people are going to come to... There will eventually be a consensus about what the proper is. And it'll probably take longer than coming to a decision...
Having a decision imposed from the top down.
By committee or by an individual medical official. But the processing power and the ability to take in the data and see what's happening is much larger when you're doing it at the individual level. Because it'll be ugly, it'll be messy, there'll be a lot of tests and a lot of failures, but we always learn more from failure than we do from a success.
Yes.
And so it'll be messy, there might be more casualties, but eventually it will come to what's closer to the right answer than the committee will.
This is
So-
what Smith
And this-
called the invisible hand.
Yeah.
So are you saying that if we had said, let's have a vote, we'll take the federal electoral system,
Yep.
we'll get Elections Canada to set up a vote,
Like
and
a
all
plebiscite.
Canadians are going to go vote, should we have a mask mandate or not? And
No.
No.
Not
Because
enough.
that
Not
would
a
be
vote.
that would be an example of coercion.
Not a vote, but it's
No, I mean,
Yeah,
it's
because if we get 51%,
yeah.
we're imposing that on the other 49.
well.
But that's what we do in democratic
It's
government
still
anyways.
democratic government, but it's still a measure of coercion. It would be further along it would be a more left idea.
But the thing
because
is,
it involves more coercion.
the thing is about this isn't just taking, like the thing is with the individual action thing is you have to take the hand of government off.
Yep.
Right, and let the individuals come to a consensus on their own organically. So you can't just say, okay, we think this thing could kill you, but we don't know. Should we wear masks? Should we not wear masks? Because nobody knows. People have to learn.
Yeah.
The
So
collective
you do what
of
seems best for
individuals
you.
has to learn.
And eventually, over a given amount of like couple of months, 90% of people would be doing one or the other, and odds are it would be the best decision.
Yeah.
Simply because 38 million people, through their own basis of trial and error, will have come to the decision which works best. And again, it's distributed decision making with the maximum amount of informational inputs is going, while it takes longer.
And his best year, and it will result in probably in more casualties.
Almost, yes. And there will be prices
So-
to pay along the way, will ultimately probably be the best decision in the long run. But that is an ideological, you and I come to that from an ideological standpoint. Someone like a Fauci or a Justin Trudeau would vehemently disagree.
Here's the other thing. Fauci, like even Fauci views Fauci as the best infectious disease guy in the world. Mm-hmm. But Fauci cannot possibly be the best infectious disease guy in the world because there's a lot of other infectious disease guys in the world, and the best infectious disease guy is probably doing research on infectious diseases, trying to learn more, not making working
policy.
the political system to become the highest paid.
But that's an aside. That's an
Fauci
aside.
wasn't there for the pay, for crying out loud. Someone had to be brought in as the expert to help guide this.
Yeah, but Fauci's been out of academia and in government. The reason that Fauci's not because we think Fauci's the most valuable guy. Fauci's the highest paid civil servant in the United States because Fauci's been in the civil service almost the longer than anybody else.
Yeah,
right?
he just has
it's a seniority thing. It's not a
expert merit thing.
We're talking messenger, medium. Who cares, right? Like, what we're talking about fundamentally is, was it correct or was it incorrect?
Or fundamentally, the difference between we're going to hold the plebiscite, we're going to hold a vote, and it's winner take all. Do we wear masks or not? Or, all right, and we get a decision, boom, real quick. Or do we say, okay, look, everyone, you decide for yourself if you want to wear a mask, and in 60 days, we're probably going to have this sorted as to what works best.
Yeah, sure. All right, so, maybe we could have gone that way, right?
Yeah.
Again, I'm not saying I know all the answers, right?
But there are people who would vehemently disagreed with that.
Because there was a risk. There is a societal risk
and a philosophical opposition to it.
Yeah, I know. And in an ideal world, I agree with that philosophical opposition.
But
right?
In the real world, you disagree.
I look at it in practical terms. I feel I looked at the situation in practical terms. I had a number of things governing, right? One is I didn't want to be responsible. I didn't want to die.
You didn't want?
I didn't want to die, right? I didn't want to be responsible for anyone else dying.
Right.
I didn't want anyone I know and love specifically to die.
Right.
I don't really want anyone to die.
Okay.
Right? Now, from a perverse point of view, is there some part of me, okay, listen, if some clown doesn't want to get vaccinated, doesn't want to wear a mask, and is ready to take that responsibility, then whatever.
Yep.
Right? That's the polite way of putting it.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
But I think the biggest thing that I think we did the right thing, and again, it's hard to prove, is, it's all great to say, okay, well, let's just do our thing and see what happens, right? But I think it could have overwhelmed our medical system.
You feel that approach put other people at risk.
Other people who that had nothing to do with COVID.
Yeah.
Right?
So like I choose whether or not I wear a mask, but if I choose not to, what if I'm putting other people at risk?
Yeah.
And this is part of what makes COVID such a interesting case study, in that there was absolutely no evidence that it put other people at risk. And this is something where I remember, like it happened this morning, where Steve almost came over the table when we were talking about how the vaccine was not sterilizing, in that it did not prevent you from getting COVID, nor did it prevent you from spreading COVID. COVID simply eliminated your symptoms, or at least minimized your symptoms. So it benefited you and you alone. It didn't stop you from infecting anyone else. So your danger to other people was completely irrelevant with the vaccine. You were not safer to other people because you got vaccinated. The same thing with masks. There was never a shred of evidence in the terms of a double-blind study, which is considered the gold standard in medical fields. There were only observational studies, which cannot distinguish between causation and correlation, in terms of the efficacy of masks in preventing transmission. So there was never any hard, where we can say without a doubt, if you smoke around other people, your secondhand smoke is a danger to them. If you drink and drive, you are a danger to other people. Mm-hmm. We can say this without a doubt. We couldn't say that with wearing masks and getting the vaccine.
Oh, I'm not sure I buy, and I have nothing to refute what you're saying. Right. So if I want to refute this, I'm going to have to find some stats that.
Let's say you don't need to refute it. You don't believe it.
I find it hard to believe.
You believe that vaccines made you safer for other people.
No,
and you believe that masks made or decrease the risk you pose to other people.
Yes.
Right.
All right. The vaccine, even by your own words, okay. If that's how it works, and for the moment, I've got no reason to believe otherwise. What I heard you just say was, me getting vaccinated didn't prevent me from infecting you.
Yes.
But it prevented me from being infected by someone else.
No. It did not. The only thing the medications was ameliorate your symptoms.
Yes. It mitigated
your symptoms.
It mitigated the impact on me. Being infected by someone, and therefore my risk of dying was less.
Yes.
And my risk of impacting the health system. And again, this is my main point, right? And again, can I prove it? But I think that two things came out of this, right? One is questionable, which is we don't know. I don't have any stats on it. Like it's purely anecdotal. It's coming out of Nova Scotia right now. Is this a result of the healthcare system being overwhelmed by COVID? I think one thing we do know is that a lot of people have there's been a lot of burnout in the medical field. A lot of people have left, right? And so that's a problem, right? And so for that reason alone, that one reason, I am glad we had a vaccine mandate. I am glad that we had a mask mandate.
That reason alone. Oh, that it would have decreased the impact on the healthcare system.
Yeah. And again, it's impossible to prove a negative.
But at the time, it opens up definitely a Pandora's box. Now, why are we only going to apply that to COVID? Why aren't we applying that to cigarette use? Why aren't we applying that?
Speaking as a smoker,
why don't we ban cigarette smoking because of the massive impact it has on the healthcare system?
You leave fucking smoking out of this, man.
Why don't we take legal action against obesity?
We should. As a smoker, it's like, listen, I can't smoke it anymore. 40, 50 years ago, I could smoke a fucking movie theater if I wanted to. Right?
Well, and
40 years ago, I could smoke in a bar in a restaurant.
But that's because of secondhand smoke, not because of your impact on the healthcare system.
Actually, funnily enough, I looked up the stats today on lung cancer. Right? Strangely enough, so between the 70s and now, and this was a UK study, men's lung cancer rates have gone down 41%.
I would imagine so, because far fewer people smoke.
But
Strangely
there's other
enough,
reasons too, right? Like,
Yeah, I would think there are.
Right.
strangely enough,
especially in the UK, because how many people in the UK have gone? Their heater is not a coal-fired furnace in the basement anymore.
Air quality,
is,
for sure.
So
There's
it's gonna be
there's
multivariate.
never one single cause for any of these things. Yeah.
the cancer rate among women
Has gone up.
has gone up 77%.
Lung
over the same
cancer?
time.
Lung cancer.
Lung cancer.
Interesting. I wonder why.
And that's in the UK. And there was a similar set of stats I read that came out of the States. Said the same thing. Women's, it didn't specify.
But while men's lung cancer rates have gone down, women's
have gone up.
Interesting.
That is
very interesting.
So,
Because I think rates of smoking have gone down roughly equally with each gender.
oh yeah,
I would think.
across the board.
Yeah.
I do. But yeah, so
But again,
as a smoker, I get it.
This is
right?
a relevant question. To what level should we control people's behavior based on the health in order to protect the healthcare system?
Well, and once you get into obesity, then now you're getting into
Yeah.
you're actually getting into
Yeah.
wealth distribution again,
Well,
Right.
or it dovetails to other issues.
because
yes.
the cheaper foods
Right.
are worse for you, right? So that's what, and people, they're just generically things that people prefer
Yeah.
to eat, right?
Yeah.
So that's what's saying. You get your lower income strata is shopping at Walmart. They can crap your food because
Because it's cheaper.
it's cheaper, and so that's part of the obesity. So that's a whole podcast unto itself.
It is, but it's a good example of how this idea of the political spectrum boils down to: do you want to control other people or do you not? And that is just an example of how that is manifested,
Well, I think you
or
see
how
control,
we see it.
You see control in a lot of different places than I do, or you define it differently than me. So that's
And also, I don't consider myself, I'm not trying to defend something, an ideal. And a lot of this discussion is putting you in that position where I'm kind of coming and saying, your philosophy is based on control. And you're kind of come back and say, well, no, it's not. It doesn't have to be. And
How about this? And this
I think your philosophy, I think you come from a point of really good ideals and genuine. I don't mean this as a punchline. I mean genuine, legitimate desire to help people, to be of good, genuine good to other people. And then some guy like me comes along and says, yeah, but what you're actually doing isn't that at all. It's just a deep-seated subconscious desire to control. That's a bitter pill to swallow.
no, actually. So I'm going to respond to that. First of all, I think you are defending an ideal. Mm-hmm. You are defending the ideal of individual rights.
Yes,
Right.
Absolutely.
So you are defending an
Absolutely.
ideal.
Yeah,
right?
but no one's attacking me for it.
And
right?
here's what it comes down to is it's basically the concept of free will. I guess we're talking biblically, we're talking original sin, right? I don't want to control anybody, right?
Are you sure?
Let me
Are
finish.
you
Let me finish what I'm about to say.
Okay.
All right. I want to be able to expect things of people. I want to be able to expect from my fellow beings behavior that I respect, that is decent towards other people.
In other words,
I want to expect it. That's not trying to control it.
What's
it's just
the difference
that's what I want to
between
expect
that and saying I want them to do what I want them to, or I want them to do as I direct?
If I have an expectation of you,
Yeah.
you are under no obligation to live up to that expectation.
Okay. That'd be great. But I don't think that's really what you want.
I don't want to control anybody.
I think what you're really asking for is I want people to do what I want them to do without me having to ask them to do it. I want them to think the way I do and behave the way I do.
I think we're getting closer to a middle ground. I would, in some ways,
Yeah.
yes. I don't want. I would prefer. I would respect. That
It would be a lot easier.
That's
for
what
sure.
I respect in people.
It would be a lot neater.
Is a certain
Yes.
standard of behavior.
But like, remember our $8 million guy?
Yeah.
And you were saying, like, you know, this guy's got all of this wealth. He could do so much more with it. He chooses not to. You've got zero sympathy for him if we seize a lot of his wealth. And then, you know, Steve presented some counterfactuals to say, well, this $8 million guy, his ability to, even if we take all of his wealth, achieves virtually nothing. And you were still steadfast, like, no, this is the way I feel. I couldn't help but come away from that and say, you know, it's really not about helping the poor. It was about control.
No.
You wanted to control that guy. What really bugged you is he wasn't doing what you wanted him to do. That was the issue. The poor were simply a moral
You've got it backwards.
balm for your conscience.
You've got it
was
backwards.
about you wanted control.
You've got it backwards. Like I said earlier, as far as I'm concerned, in this society, we shouldn't have a homeless problem.
Right.
Right? If we had no homeless problem, and if we had no
Yeah.
social problems whatsoever,
Yeah.
I got no problem with a guy
Right.
who's got $8 million a year. Go to fucking town.
Yeah.
Get on your yacht, fuck off. Right? Go live your life. Great.
Right.
Love you. Right? Don't.
But
so I don't have a problem with the guy having $8 million.
That's an impossible situation.
I have,
like
it's only impossible if we say something. Now, here's something. I know you need to go.
Okay.
But you just opened the door to something.
Yeah.
Something I want to say. So, my mother pointed this out to me the other day. She said, in her parents' time, up through the 50s, right? A family could have one income.
Yep.
The mother could stay at home.
Yep.
They could have kids, go to school.
They could afford a home.
They could afford a home.
Yep.
And you could make a living wage.
Yep.
You could raise a family.
A very good middle
and
income.
And
Yep.
a CEO of a company made roughly 50 times
Yep.
what the average worker did.
Okay.
Now we've gotten to the point where with two incomes,
Yep.
nobody can afford a home. And CEOs are making roughly 200 times.
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
even remember the
Or
amount.
yeah,
it might actually be
it's gone up.
2,000
Yeah.
times.
It's gone
right?
up a great deal.
So I think that's part of where I'm coming from. I think that's
Yeah.
where our society has kind of failed. Now, here's the interesting thing though, because that's the economic,
Yep.
right? Socially, I point out to my mother, you know what? Back then, a white family could afford those things. Not necessarily a black family. Not necessarily. So now it's like we've come the other way. The rights for minorities, for gays,
Yeah.
for all those things, those have become standardized. We've evolved, right?
Okay.
So now we're all. But
I don't see
now
the
we're
relevance,
We're
though.
all equally down.
I don't want to get sidetracked on that, but I don't see the relevance.
Well, I thought
I don't see how race plays any role in that.
I thought it was interesting that our society has gone up in one way in the equality scale. We've come down
Because-
we've come down
Yeah.
economically, right? So it's
Right.
that was just
Okay, I see what you mean. But
was-
that's a good example. You feel that should be controlled. There should be a higher force that tells people that you think it's wrong that a guy should make 250 times what the average worker makes. That strikes you as morally offensive. That's wrong. That a guy should make that much.
You keep trying to put words into my mouth. No,
Well,
I don't.
how am I wrong? You feel a moral opposition to the fact that some guy makes 250 or 300 times the salary of the average worker.
If I felt really passionately about it, I'd be out there lining them up against the walls and putting bullets in the backs of their
Well, that's
heads.
a
Right?
bit
So
rash.
I'm not doing anything about it.
Okay.
All right.
But you still feel that's because, like,
I feel
if you
that-
didn't feel that it was objectionable, you wouldn't bring that up in the first sentence.
We talk about ideals,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And we've talked somewhat about my ideals, right? My ideals, as I presented them today, are left libertarian.
Okay.
Right? It is respect for each other's rights.
Okay.
It is a certain standard of expectation of a society for each other.
But then
right?
why do you care how much somebody else makes? What multiple they make of the mean? Why do you care? Why is it even remotely important? It doesn't affect any one of us. What the president of the Bank of Montreal makes has absolutely zero impact on
when we're
anybody
living in a
here.
society when the average person can no longer afford a home,
Okay.
right? And whereas 50 years ago, 60 years ago, they could,
Okay.
right? And no, again, causation, correlation.
Right.
right?
I don't see a connection.
Yeah, I mean the affordability crisis is the ultimate in multivariate causes, right? Like, I mean, it's more expensive to build a home. Like it's six figures now
Sure.
in Ontario. I was just hearing a story. It's like it costs six figures just to get the permitting done to build a new home.
Yeah, like I don't see a connection
You know?
between the two. But I know that it's really important to you. It's really important to you.
No, it's not important. It's just like I said. As a society, I look at our society. I go, you know what? I think it's kind of wrong.
Right.
I'm not saying he's
Right.
wrong. I'm not saying
we don't care. We think that's none of our business. As long as somebody is voluntarily willing to, like, say, a board of directors is voluntarily, or the shareholders are voluntarily willing to part with their money to pay that CEO 250 times the mean, then
take him out of the mix.
Go ahead.
Do me a favor. Take him out of the mix for a second.
Okay.
All right.
The CEO of X
Yeah.
company. Okay.
Right. And the board of directors and
Okay.
all of that. All right.
Right.
There is wealth in this nation.
Okay.
All right. And this is what we're talking about. We're talking
Yep,
about
we're
the distribution of the wealth.
Distribution of the
Okay?
wealth.
I'm not pointing the fingers at anybody at this
Okay.
point. All right. I'm just saying it is tragic
Okay.
that our society has people dying on the streets every day
Okay.
when we are such a wealthy nation. That's what it comes down to. All right. Am I asking to control any of that at this point in this conversation? I am not. I'm
Okay.
saying it would be nice if pipe dream ideals.
Sure. That
If
we could
our-
live in. It would be nice
our
if we could live in a
society-
perfect world.
If our society somehow defined itself, managed itself, agreed within itself
Yeah.
in such a way that we didn't have people dying on the streets every day. That's all I'm saying.
I don't think we have people dying on the streets, but I get what you're saying. If we could eliminate poverty, that would indeed be a great thing. It would be.
Yeah, just raise the bar a bit.
But I would like to eliminate crime too.
Yeah.
I wish we could find a way to do that. I don't think they're really within the realm of possibility. We can seek to mitigate crime. We can seek to mitigate poverty.
You reduce poverty, you reduce crime.
Well, maybe. Not all crime is connected to poverty.
Not all.
The question is again, we are never going to achieve that perfect ideal. And this is why we have philosophical discussion. What is the best way to mitigate poverty? And this is where I think there's common agreement between right and left, port and starboard. Both wish to mitigate the effects of poverty. Both wish to mitigate the effects of crime. Both wish to mitigate any manner of human suffering. The method by which we choose to do it is where we differ. Should individuals be allowed to seek their own solutions and their own methods, be it direct action where I buy a sandwich and I give it to a guy, or I choose how much of my income I give to charity or to institutions which are directly involved with poverty mitigation? Or is this a decision that should be imposed upon me and other people? Even if they disagree with me, should a decision be imposed upon them? If so, to what extent?
Well, I think that's where we get into the conversation that we have absolutely failed to have about government and coercion and how that
Can we
the
at
democratic
least
process creates the government. We choose a government.
Sure.
We agree to that government. That government is the one that starts defining
But
where
can
that
we
money's
at
gonna go.
least agree that where you sit, where you decide on any given issue on that spectrum, if you believe that more of the decision making should be pushed to the individual, you are on the right. And if more of the decision making should be imposed, you are on the left.
No, I do not agree with that. I fundamentally disagree with that.
And that is where I think we are at loggerheads.
Yes. So if I can coerce these two to get back in this room in a reasonable amount of time, well, perhaps we will revisit this. And
Perhaps. But I don't know. Can we actually go anywhere with this?
I don't know.
I don't think we can. I don't think we can.
But we'll try.
I don't
Some other
think.
time.
I don't think either one of us is good. I don't know if we can take this any further, guys.
We'll see. I've got some homework to do.
Right?
I'm going to see what I can come up with of why Hitler, Franco, Pinochet, Mussolini all belong on the right.
Oh, absolutely. I want to get into that, buddy.
Right? So if I can find that, maybe there's scope for some more discussion.
Absolutely.
All right.
You know what?
Right.
I am totally up for that discussion, whether it's attached to this or whether you want to call it a new episode. I am totally up for that discussion. 100%. I will make a request of you, though. If you find anything on the Phalange in Lebanon, please share it, because I've been doing some look into this myself, and I can't find a lot of information on those guys.
Yeah, I think the Phalange is going to net, because now we're going back to the 80s.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think they
that's,
were the...
those particular Middle Eastern politics have gone since the end of the first Civil War.
They were the last, that I know of, the last example of a fascist, as in model of Franco and Mussolini, the last example of a fascist
The
state.
funny thing was, I did not connect the dots between that name and Franco. I thought Phalangist. It was a nebulous concept to me during
Yeah.
the Civil War in Lebanon.
Yeah. I thought they were a militia.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought they were
And
an
I didn't
ethnic militia.
understand what the word meant.
I didn't know
It
that
was
there was a
only
party.
when I was well into reading about the Spanish Civil War
Yeah.
that the term phalangist kept coming up.
Yeah.
And then I was like, wait a minute, I've heard this somewhere before, right? I'll let you know.
Yeah, because there's not a lot, like, I can find information on what life was like in Franco's Spain, government policy, what you could say were characteristics or hallmarks of the Franco regime. And so then I can compare those to, say, Portugal at the same time. I can compare
Under
those
Salazar,
to,
yeah.
Yeah, I can compare those to, say, Mussolini's Italy. I can compare those to National Socialist Germany. It's much harder to find information on, say, trade policy or labor policy in the Lebanese Phalange or the government of the Phalange party in Lebanon. So if you find anything,
I'll
let
let
me
you
know.
know. I'll let you
sure.
know.
All right. Bye, everybody.